This program has been made possible in part by the following sponsors. The Trial Lawyers Association of BC. The Vancouver Courier newspaper. My new book about addictions, All the Way Home, Building Recovery That Works. There's a much-quoted economist from Peru named Hernando de Soto Polar, and he has argued that the issue isn't so much that those folks in third-world countries are paid $1 a day to make Air Jordans that sell for $250, $300 in New York, but that they have no investment. And he says, give them shares, make them part of the company, give them dividends, and so on. Ownership is the key. So I think that is one of the many elements in a kind of social philosophy called justice, not charity. And here in Vancouver, Noel Herron is one of the people who represents the Justice, Not Charity Working Group. Great to have you here, Noel. You spent years before you were doing this, or maybe while you were doing this, as a Vancouver School Board trustee.
I did.
How did that come about?
Well, 3 years. We just felt that it was time to get involved in public policy and actually change, you know.
What was your working life about, though?
Well, I was retired at that time, you know. So I figured I had the time. I use it to improve the public policy, you know.
Good for you. It must have been an eye-opener to be part of the Vancouver School Board.
Well, yes, very much so. It's the most diverse and most complex school system in the entire province. It's not the largest now, Surrey is, but it's unquestionably the most diverse and most complex. And the one-size-fits-all formula from across the water, it's abysmal. It shows a profound ignorance of the needs of a large metropolitan school system.
One-size-fits-all in our school system may have fit 60 or 80 years ago, I don't know, but it certainly doesn't work today.
Well, there are needs. Rural school boards need extra funds, unquestionably, for transportation, and they have other needs as well. I think each school board is different, but the differences are sharper and more pronounced in an urban system. And that's why when you have kids coming to school, as last month when the board released it for the first time in its history, the fact that 2,000 kids were coming to school hungry. Oh my God, that's shocking.
Yeah, we trail all of Canada, do we not? Yeah, we're the worst in terms of child poverty.
We lead Canada in child poverty for the 4th year in a row, and that is absolutely disgraceful.
It's appalling, and it's especially bothersome when you consider that our Premier presents herself as a family's first Premier.
Well, that's, I mean, it's difficult to find a greater, sharper contrast in that statement and what's really happening. The province does not yet have a comprehensive and coherent child poverty strategy. They've spread it out among 3 ministries deliberately, so you can't hold them accountable for precise goals or precise targets. They've done that. And they issued a report last year or 2 years ago that was widely criticized by First Call. And First Call is the province's leading advocacy group for children and families.
And they've been here on this show. You don't know, the only person I've ever left this studio to interview for this program was Mary Ellen Turpel-Lafond, who is the advocate for children and so on. And I went over and did the show in our Victoria studios because it's hard for her to get over. And I think she does a wonderful job.
She certainly stands up for kids and families.
Absolutely, but aren't her hands tied at the wrists? I mean, does anybody listen to her?
That's what it makes me wonder.
Yes.
And when you look at that and put the number of kids arriving in school hungry and what's happening with children, particularly First Nations as well, you know, the situation is an absolute disgrace, really, you know. And we're not a poor province. We're one of the wealthiest provinces in this country. And yet we're ending up for the 4th year in a row leading the country in child poverty.
Did you, maybe I'm dreaming this, but I get the sense that I read somewhere that you said during your years with Vancouver School Board that you saw kids coming to school without breakfast over and over again, and you saw teachers taking their own wallets out and buying kids food.
That's happening more and more. More and more. First of all, I mean, see, the stats tell you 1 in 5 children or families in this province lives in poverty. 1 in 5. You move that over to there's 500,000 kids attending K-12 schools, and you do the math and the numbers you have of kids coming to school in poverty. What's happened is this: in the last several years, poverty has spread wider and deeper. We added 2 schools last year in this city to it. Selkirk Annex,
yes,
and farther north up into Champlain Heights,
yep.
You know, another school. And that school, incidentally, is Cook School. And, you know, the person who, by the way, pays the breakfast program for that is Carol Taylor, I think a wonderful humanitarian. When she was a councillor in Vancouver, she battled George Pugh for giving money to the Vancouver School Board. She realized what was happening, and council did at that time step into it.
You mean she pays for that breakfast program herself?
Yeah, $8,000. I believe it's $8,000 a year.
But how do you explain? No, look, maybe it takes someone smarter than the two of us put together to figure this out. We've got the biggest real estate numbers, one of the biggest real estate numbers in the world, certainly in North America. You know, the average cost of a house in Vancouver is $1 million. You know, houses, you know, east of Maine that used to be $33,000 or whatever are now $1 million. And yet, are you telling me, are we to understand then that all the people who own all of these houses are sending their kids to private schools? I mean, what is going on?
Well, you have an enormous contrast, increasing contrast between the haves and the have-nots, yes. And that sharpens, that worsens the situation. And families living in poverty, and it's not just east of Maine.
It's everywhere.
Yes. It's west of Maine too. The squeeze is on the middle class as well.
Yes, of course.
With both parents working.
Yeah.
And you would never, years ago, classify those people as impoverished, or certainly with their kids, some of their kids are coming to school. It's a very touchy area.
So Noel, let's get right into this very interesting, I don't think it's that subtle, I think it's pretty clear, this philosophy of justice rather than charity.
Feeding kids is a frontline provincial responsibility.
Okay.
It's not the responsibility of corporate donors. It's not the responsibility of people like Carol Taylor, but yet they step up because the provincial government has failed. It's failed a generation of special needs kids. It's failed them miserably. In fact, it's left them behind.
So you're saying justice, not charity, means it's all very nice for churches and ladies' auxiliaries and so on to do their best to feed kids. But in fact, what you're saying is, as a public policy, we should have school cafeterias that supply a hearty breakfast for kids.
It should be fully funded.
Regardless of what money they have.
Yes, right. It should be a universal program. And, you know, if this was a poor province, in fact, we're one of the wealthiest in Canada, there should be no difficulty. But what we get from the provincial government, first of all, the Minister of Education doesn't even mention, not once, we have a new Minister of Education, not once has he mentioned in 2 years in office the word hungry children, yes. Not once. And hungry kids don't learn. Hungry kids fall right through the cracks, straight through the cracks. And then you have it spread out of 4 ministries, none of which admit or even say the word. You don't hear the word hungry kids from...
well, there's Ministry of Family and Children, there's Ministry of Health, there's Ministry of Education, what else? What am I missing?
And there's Don, what's his name's ministry? The one in charge of single parents, because they had, you remember they had to back away from the fact that they were pulling back money from the single parents.
Oh, yes, of course.
Okay.
We had those folks who
they've tossed in another minister as well. The reason being is spread it out. Makes appear you're doing something, when in fact they're bloody well doing little or nothing.
So what would you say, Noel, to the people who would complain? Let's say suddenly tomorrow morning there's a well-stocked cafeteria feeding kids in every school in Vancouver. What would you say to the people who say, well, look, a lot of those kids don't need my money to eat. A lot of those kids have wealthy parents. They're fine.
I think the answer is quite simple.
Please.
It's the common good. You know, it's a civil society. I believe most people, no matter whether they're Liberal or NDP or Green or what have you, believe in feeding kids. Kids are an investment. Public education in this province is a basic investment.
So do I have to get out my branding iron and brand you a commie, a communist? Oh my God, is that what you're talking about?
Well, you know what? If you don't do it, you'll pay now or pay later.
Yes.
And we're going to pay the socioeconomic health, education, and what have you, social impact of not feeding these kids. We're talking a generation, and the number is increasing every year exponentially. No. Last year we added on 2 schools. How many are we going to add on this year? And did you notice too, in the last election in Vancouver, Vision said they take $400,000 out of, I guess, their reserve fund. That was Vision's statement. NPA said we will go to corporations and we'll go to philanthropists and private donors.
And?
So, well, nothing has happened so far. Where today's paper, there's a shortfall of 8.5 million.
Wait a minute, are you trying to tell me those were what you call your empty political promises?
Well, I don't. I'm just citing their electoral platform.
Yes.
Visions was. I mean, give Vision its due.
Yes.
I think if they were the majority, they're not. They would have taken the 400. They can't because they're in the minority. Now, what NPA is going to do, and they're also well intentioned.
Yes.
Give them their due.
Yeah.
And I should mention to you
yes.
on this program a nod to the Vancouver Sun. The Vancouver Sun's Adopt a School program keeps the wolves at bay for some schools, small number, but it doesn't cover all of them. And the ministry has all the facts and figures. We have some areas up country in the north where very high unemployment. There's no program for kids. And the school boards, by the way, timid and toothless, some of these school boards, don't even speak up for them.
Why not?
They see it as not an educational issue, which is incredibly blind. I'm assuming, I don't know why not, I don't understand it. Like Surrey is the largest school board in the province. It's in a worse situation than Vancouver. Vancouver, give it its due, came up with a number. Yes. We think that number, 2,000, is an underestimate. We think it's closer to 2.5 or even as high as 3.
Yes.
We kept, like last year we added on 2 schools, and each year we should be adding on more and more. Even if the government said we'll target the areas of intense poverty, never mind the universal program, which you mentioned, that would be a huge step forward.
Noel Herron is our guest. We're going to take a little break. Noel, we come back. We'll talk about the origins of this justice, not charity idea and how it operates around the world. And we'll give you some more examples besides school children, how we might implement these ideas here in our own backyard. Your chance to say hello to davidberner.com. By the way, I got this furious, enraged email the other day in which this guy said that I claimed I lived in the British properties. I never claimed such a thing because I don't. I don't want to live in the British properties. Give me $10 million. I wouldn't move to the British properties, okay? I don't know where you got that, sir. Anyway, we're always happy to hear from you. Try to get your stuff right. And always happy to say hello to these folks who support us here on Shaw Community Television, Cable 4. Back in just a minute. I have to go check on my properties house.
This program has been made possible in part by the following sponsors. The Trial Lawyers Association of BC. The Vancouver Courier newspaper.
My new book about addictions, All the Way Home, Building Recovery That Works. We're facing that plethora of spring celebrations and religious rituals, Ramadan, Passover, and Easter. And wasn't it old, you know who said, let's give folks a means to fish rather than just giving them a fish? Our guest is Noel Herron with the Justice Rather Than Charity group, and isn't that the central concept of justice rather than charity? Let's give people the opportunity to do something with their lives. Let's sort of lend a hand up rather than just giving people a loaf of bread.
As an organization,
yes.
A member of Justice Not Charity, we've been trying to battle this, fighting this battle for almost a decade.
Yes.
And we could see when nobody's stepping forward. And even with the NDP as a previous government, you could see the increase in poverty is small, but nothing like in the last 10 years, nothing. I mean, see, it's galloped right now. So we try to monitor the situation and speak out publicly for these kids.
So you're saying rather than donate to food banks, raise the minimum wage. And by the way, the province just did by a few cents. But
20 cents an hour.
How much?
20 cents.
20. So, but it's not up to the $15 that the unions and others are calling for.
No, I think that's the first, if
yeah,
that happens, that'd be a real step forward. I mean, say, 20 cents an hour is about $1.20, $1.25, or $1.30. That's the BC Fed called it pathetic, and that's a very good description. It's a pathetic change to the minimum wage.
So again, instead of in terms of clothes, in terms of food, you're saying raise the minimum wage. It's all very nice to donate clothes. It's all very nice to donate food. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It is giving and it's kind and so on. But the real issue is let's provide wages that people can fend for themselves.
A living wage, really.
Yeah.
I mean, it's $10.20 an hour, which it is right now. Now, at the BC Liberals have decided that's the way they're going to go. By the way, it took them almost a decade to bring it up to 10.
Yeah, I know. You're also saying that rather than have school fundraisers and having, sock hops and whatever it takes to pay for school bands, which by the way are just being cut as we speak today, and pay for all the things that are needed in schools, food, art supplies, books, and so on. You're saying we're supposed to have universal education. Let's pay for it.
We're not paying for it. It's severely underfunded, very badly underfunded. In fact, BCTF maintains that public schools K-12 are under assault, and they are right on the money. What we get when you argue against that, you get evasion, you get doublespeak, you get hyperbole from the BC Liberals. You don't get a straightforward answer. Our schools are suffering and suffering badly.
Yeah, not that the BC Liberals are my favorite group in the world, but let's put also some responsibility in another area. One of the things you talk about in your work is social housing, for example. Now, it's a simple fact, and this is not to get the local politicians off the hook, but it is a simple fact, Noel, that Central Mortgage and Housing, an arm of the federal government, at one point was doing a magnificent job in developing and paying for social housing. And about 30 years ago,
they stepped out of it.
They bailed.
Yeah.
They just walked.
Yeah.
And so nobody can afford to build social housing today.
Well, in this city, it's the most expensive city in Canada, one of the more, next to Toronto.
Yeah.
Transportation, housing, and food.
Yeah.
And food, those three.
Yes.
A family on $10.20 an hour live on that?
No.
Absolutely.
Everything's gone up. No. Everything's gone up and going up. So do you see any good signs? You see that anybody is prepared to do something real about social housing? I have to be honest with you, when I see stories in the paper about social housing being created out of metal crates, I think I'm losing my mind.
Well, the last time I can recall that there was some genuine effort is when I think Mike Harcourt was premier. That's going back quite some time.
Yes.
That's give a nod to the NDP on that.
Yes.
Now, the provincial government is buying some hotels, and given the need, there's a desperate need, and given the need, it's peanuts.
Don't get me started on Mikey, because Mikey is now the chair of a medical marijuana company, so that's another issue. Universal child care.
I think we need it desperately, especially, maybe we can't, the argument is we can't afford that right away. Start on down the path and do it bit by bit by bit. I mean, say Quebec funded, very effective, and more women went to work, and the research in that was very positive. But you'll get all kinds of arguments against having it. The parents, single parents, can't go to work. They're, in effect, it's better for them to stay home. And you free up the workforce. And there are positive economic benefits to that, and social benefits, and there's a desperate need for it.
Noel, Justice for Rather Than Charity Working Group, is this a large group? Or are there a lot of people?
Not very large at all. We're made up of some parents,
yes,
some teachers, some principals, and a couple of retired trustees.
Yes.
And like we talk to people, I've met with the Vancouver Elementary Teachers Anti-Poverty Group and visit schools and talk to some principals. Now, some principals should get their act together because they have kids in their schools who are coming to school hungry.
Yeah.
Those teachers who are quietly feeding them out of their own pocket, by the way.
Yes.
Sometimes these schools are not aware of it, and even the people next door are not aware of it. So we're dealing with something we call hidden poverty. That's why we're questioning the Vancouver School Board's 2000.
Well, we don't like to admit that we have poverty.
Well, there's the part.
Because we have such a nice community. We're such nice people, It doesn't look good on us.
Well, this week's Economist has an article about Vancouver City. You read it, my God, we're in paradise. Well, the soft underbelly of that is 3,000 kids coming to school hungry, falling asleep at their desk, inattentive, and education-wise, falling through the cracks.
Justice Rather Than Charity is not only about kids in school, but it's about some really large issues like civil rights and free speech and peace and human rights, workers and immigrant rights, healthcare reform, environmental justice. It's about a lot of issues. And how do you speak to these issues in a new way that isn't all just about give us your $10?
Well, I think it's, you have to consolidate the opposition. First of all, you work through organizations like First Call.
Yes.
First Call.
And BC Coalition.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
There's a bill against poverty. There.
Yes.
Some very, very effective, highly effective provincial organizations.
Yes.
We're a small group, but I think, Margaret Mead said a small number. You remember the famous
quote?
That's right.
Yes, of course. So it's amazing what you can do.
You keep hammering away at it, because it's not right. It's very, very unfair. And it's, to ignore it completely, when you have a Minister of Education who doesn't even acknowledge the fact that he's talking about doing a whole revision of professional development in the province, I'd say address the immediate needs first of all. Look past your nose.
What do you say, if anything, to the handful of extremely wealthy people in the city who do give to charity? But sometimes, I have to be honest, Noel, sometimes I see something happening in the community that 150,000 would fix like that, and I wonder why person X doesn't just write the check, because it's so obvious.
You're right. I mean, it's a drop in the bucket, really, When you have that enormous contrast between... I look at the middle of summer when I turn on my TV and see this white-on-white dinner.
Yes.
That?
Yes, the white-on-white dinner, yeah.
Bottles of wine here.
Yeah.
And I think of, my God, those kids coming to school on the desk. And the schools are just around the corner. And it's lovely to see white linen, French wine, the whole thing. And then these kids don't have,
You're one of those, I bet you're one of those miserable commies who goes to.
I've been called worse.
I'm just joking. Who goes to St. Paul's Cathedral and you look at all the gold and all the statues and all the Titian and the Michelangelo and you go, well, if you sold all that, you could feed people.
Well, there's a bit of logic behind that too, I'm not saying I'm a believer in the free market. Make no mistake about it.
Yes, I'm sure.
But I think that we have to step up as a society. You just can't keep adding the numbers each year, and saying, well, we're waiting to ship the what? What's the LNG ship coming in?
Yes.
We're going to wait that, docks? Well, we may wait one hell of a long time.
I would say don't hold your breath because you'll float to the ceiling. We'll give you a paintbrush to do the ceiling.
We're talking probably about $10 million,
yes.
To have a decent program. tables, chairs,
Yes.
and food, and a properly, you know, vetted menu for these kids. And my God, is that a... and then on the other side, we're talking about 8 billion to 12 billion for Site C?
Yes, yeah.
Come on. Give me a break.
Noel, thanks so much for coming in. It was great to have you.
It's been a pleasure.
Great to have you here today.
Yeah.
It's lovely.
Thank you for inviting me.
Lovely to see a guy like you still punching the bag.
Well, it keeps me, as the Irish say, above ground. I'm not,
Yes, absolutely.
not sprouting daisies, you know.
That's right, on the right side of the grass.
Yeah.
Great to have you here, Noel. Thank you so much. Noel Herron from Justice Not Charity Working Group. Next week, speaking of major religions, here's one that isn't a major religion. There are many, many people who don't believe in religion at all. Whether or not they believe in God, I don't know, but they don't believe in religion. And many of those people are just folks who don't believe in religion. But then there's humanists, and that's a whole other story. And we will have a lady from the BC Humanists here to talk about that interesting sort of counter-philosophy. It won't be as strange as you think. Thanks for being with us today here on Shaw Community Television Cable 4. Good night.